Cast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, good morning, and welcome to the Department of Family and Support Services Division on Domestic Violence RFP Technical Assistance session. I'm Maura McCauley, Deputy Commissioner for Domestic Violence and Homeless Programs at DFSS. You can go to the next slide.
Hi, everyone. My name is Thomas Mose. I work at the Department of Family Support Services. I wanted to just speak up here because I help with technical assistance on all the webinars for the RFPs in our department. So just real quick, some housekeeping that due to the volume of participants, everyone has been placed on mute. Please use the chat box to notify us of any technical issues, and please submit your questions via the chat box. The DDV will address the questions at the end of the presentation, and they will release a written addendum that will be posted and updated with all the questions and responses. And just lastly, yes, the slides will be available, and we'll share with you how you can access them at a later date, and a recording of this presentation will be posted on the DFSS YouTube channel, and that will also be shared at a later date with how you can access it. So thanks everyone for joining us, and with that, I'll pass it back to the team.
Okay, thanks, Tom. So today in this session, we are going to cover an overview of DFSS and our commitment to outcomes. The domestic violence team will provide an overview of all of the program models that are included in this RFP, including their purpose, goals, and target population, program requirements, performance measures, and selection criteria. We will also talk about the timeline of when the application opens and when it closes. And then our colleague, Julia Talbot, will join us to provide some technical assistance information, just general technical assistance that's available for applicants, and specific information about our e-procurement system, which is the online system that is used for application submission. And then we will have time for questions at the end. Next slide. So there are 7 programs within DFSS that you can see on this slide. And this presentation, we will focus on the Division on Domestic Violence. If you go to the entire CDGA book that was released last week, you can see other RFPs that are available from other program divisions at DFSS and other city departments, and information about their technical assistance webinars as well. Next slide. DFSS formed in 2009. It was a merger of five departments. Our mission is to work with community partners and connect Chicago residents and families to resources that build stability, support their well-being, and empower them to thrive. Our goals and our priorities are really to deliver and support high-quality services, to collaborate with our community partners, our sister agencies, public officials, to make sure that we are informing the public of resources available to them through DFSS and its community partners, and then to really be good stewards of DFSS's resources to make sure that our funds are being used in the best way possible. Next slide. As you may know, DFSS launched phase 1 of our commitment to outcomes, the strategic framework, in early 2016 to transition our department to a more outcome-oriented and data-driven approach for delivering services. At its heart, the strategic framework is about placing greater focus on the quality of services and client progress, or outcomes, as opposed to the number of clients or units of services delivered, outputs. The first phase of the strategic framework was internal and focused on setting priorities and outcome goals and making them a core part of our department's work. In 2018, we moved to the second phase of the strategic framework, incorporating the strategic framework into our contracting, and engaging the service provider community to improve outcomes. Most of DFSS's work is achieved through partnerships with service providers in the community. So unless our outcome goals are embedded in our partnerships, we know we won't be able to achieve results. We've developed RFPs and contracts that are more focused on outcome goals. We are now in phase 3 and working to implement a performance improvement system to prioritize and execute efforts and improve results, and are developing phase 4, which is system coordination to improve service matching and referral and linking data to improve client experience and outcomes. Next slide. You will see our strategic contracting work reflected in our RFPs, in our selection criteria, and our application questions for CDGA across the DFSS divisions. We've continued to refine our RFPs and contracts. We want to use RFPs and contracts to focus on outcomes, to share our priorities and a plan for tracking performance improvement, and to create a better flow of information on best practices, high quality services, and what we know about the population we're trying to serve. We've continued to focus on more outcome goals and less on activities, making selection criteria and applications reflect our priorities, and ask questions that give us a better, more specific information for funding decisions. We're focusing a lot on performance measurement and learning from our data to support continuous improvement in services. One of the things that the domestic violence team is embarking on this year is engaging our delegates in conversation and collaborative approaches to performance improvement. We are creating space for learning. We know you all have unique strengths and bring something different to the continuum of services that DFSS funds. So we want to learn more about these strengths and your ability to serve special populations or address distinct needs. So we're asking new questions and creating space for you to share innovative ideas in your applications. Next slide. The DFSS RFPs articulate what we want to achieve for Chicagoans rather than focusing on activities alone. Our RFPs are making sure that outcome goals are front and center. This isn't just about focusing on activities we want you to do, but focusing on what we're trying to achieve for the people that we serve. So this is really what our framework looks like. And you should see that in the RFPs. Next slide. Our selection criteria is focused on results and best practices. You can see the names of our evaluation criteria in the middle of each RFP, including the criteria and scoring in depth. And this is an example that you see on the left hand of the slide. Our application questions also reflect all of this and help us gather information to make good decisions. So you'll see some new questions and should take a fresh look. This year, based on applicant and evaluator survey feedback, we have focused more clearly on describing program expectations and priorities for improvement. Additionally, given the events over the past year, we have also reviewed all of our RFPs to integrate a greater focus on equity and lessons learned about service delivery through the COVID-19 pandemic. Next slide. So now we'll move into the domestic violence division specific information, and very briefly just want to introduce our team, many of whom will be presenting on this webinar. So Elisa Rodriguez is our Managing Deputy Commissioner who oversees these 4 divisions: domestic violence, homeless services, human services, and workforce. Again, I'm Ria Performance, Deputy Commissioner of Domestic Violence Services and Homeless Services. And then our amazing Division on Domestic Violence team is Adriana Camarda, Cynthia Jackson, Gail Woods, and Mira Raja. And you'll be hearing from Adriana, Gail, and Mira today. Next slide. So to talk a little bit about changes that you'll see in the 2022 RFP, one of the many things that we learned throughout the pandemic is that our domestic violence providers were essentially required to work remotely. And over the past year, in conversations with our delegate agencies, the domestic violence team has kind of compiled lessons learned and it made a determination that this was an option that we wanted to be able to continue, knowing that the pandemic is still in effect, but that there were benefits from remote and virtual services that we want applicants to be able to consider, even when the pandemic comes to an end or is under control. The other big change is the consolidation of the counseling and advocacy program models. We made the decision to consolidate them back together. They had at one time been together and then were separated. But the team made the decision to consolidate them back together to ensure that victims are offered a full array of DV services, no matter where or what service they connect with at the beginning. The program model wants to ensure that both services are available. There will be more of an in-depth conversation later on in the presentation about that. And then the other change is that the DV program models are now using the DV victim definition under the Illinois Domestic Violence Act. So programs do not have to turn away victims who fall under that definition, but aren't necessarily victims of intimate partner violence and may offer services. We're asking that you, at a minimum, offer referrals to other appropriate services if you engage victims under other parts of the definition. And the counseling and legal advocacy model is the only model that the DV division will be collecting data on serving non-intimate partner violence victims. Next slide. So these are the program models that are included in the RFP: legal services, resource and information advocacy, multidisciplinary team, supervised visitation and safe exchange, and counseling and legal advocacy. So the presentation will go into further detail and highlight major points for these specific applications. Next slide, please. And this slide is just a few things to consider as you're reviewing and determining which program model to apply for and pulling your applications together. But we really want to highlight that this is a competitive application process. So we are welcoming new applicants, renewing applicants, applicants who want to consider expanding their projects to apply. In the RFP, at the end of every program model, you will see how much funding is available for the specific program model, and typically what we have funded in the past to give you a good idea of the size of the grants. This RFP is not including CARES Act funding at this time, so this is really for our base domestic violence funding from the city budget. And also want to highlight that although you see the program funding amounts and ranges that we typically fund in each program model, please consider what it will actually take you to deliver services in the program model that you're applying for, and apply for what it will take, because that helps us understand the full scope and helps us, again, advocate for the funding that we need as we consider program decisions and funding decisions. And then finally, want to flag that if anyone is interested in applying for DV-specific shelter or housing, that those RFPs can be found in the Homeless Division RFP package. there is a webinar this afternoon at 1 p.m. For the homeless division, and we can put a link in the chat for that if anyone is interested in registering for that one. And I am going to now turn it over to Gail Woods to take us into the first program model.
Good morning. I'll be speaking with you today about the Legal Services Program Model. The purpose of this model is to ensure free access for victims to legal representation. We know that access to legal services provides victims with long-term solutions to a life without violence through protective orders, gaining custody, receiving child support, and other legal remedies. The target population for this limited funding remains intimate partner violence. Next slide, please. So each of the RFPs do have common program requirements, such as 40-hour training and mandated reporter compliance. At a minimum, the staff included on the program budget, or those that have client contact, need to have the 40-hour training and mandated reporter certifications. You should have admission to the Illinois Bar. Programs should also offer crisis counseling, safety planning, as well as an overview of the legal protections available to victims. Programs should provide legal representation and advocacy in both domestic violence and family court, as well as other cases related to domestic violence. And programs should also offer community outreach and education for the legal and law enforcement community. Next slide, please. So the performance measures, the service outcomes measure how your program impacts the survivor. And the victim outcomes, they measure the impact of receiving services to increase a survivor's self-determination, knowledge, and their emotional well-being. Programs are required to enter data into InfoNet, quarterly templates, and survey victims through a Survey Monkey or a paper format. Next slide, please. So in terms of the selection criteria, applications will be ranked on the basis of score. The Domestic Violence Division may consider prioritizing a program higher that offers services in a needed location or a certain language ability, or either to target subpopulations. Next slide, please. And now I'll turn it over to my colleague, Ria.
Good morning, everyone. We're just doing a little bit of chair shuffling here because we're all together in one room. So I will be, some of the same information that Gail gave you in that format, I'm going to be giving it to you about the RIA program, the MDT program, and the SBSE program. So the first slide is talking about, with RIA, the purpose, the goals, and the target population. And as you look at this slide, it's good to remember that the purpose of the RIA program is to provide brief legal advocacy services to in-person victims at the courthouse. And yes, I hear your question coming already. With the pandemic, clearly, the RIA services have been impacted, the service delivery, and it has shifted to where the program staff can now support the legal advocacy hotline, which was created to provide the same type of services when the in-person court was not available. The goal of the program, however, remains the same, whether people receive services in person or over the phone. And the target population for remote services is anyone interested in more information on how they can pursue filing for an order of protection. So next slide. Now we can talk about the program requirements for people who are applying to provide RIA services. It's the same thing as Gail told you with staff for legal services, in that they have to be 40-hour trained and compliant with the mandated reporter requirements. The way that services are provided are by proactively engaging victims at the courthouse, or remain flexible to the flow of how victims are gaining access to the DV court. That has been changing. Those of you who are involved know that. In person, also, there are other offices that contribute to the process, such as the clerk's office, the state's attorney's office, and other service providers, and that's the bullet that talks about working collaboratively. We do expect that RIA people have referral networks outside the courthouse so that the program can refer people to services outside of the courthouse as needed, and also flexibility to move the work if it's required. Next slide. When we look at the Ria performance measures, because of the short duration of the interaction, the performance is based solely on victim feedback. So we tie that victim feedback back to the purpose of the program model, which is to provide walk-in victims or callers to the hotline information, or to make choices about how to address the violence in their lives. Next slide. So we move on to the selection criteria that we will use when looking at RIA applications, and the applications will be ranked on the basis of score. DDV may prioritize programs that offer location, services, a different array of services, language abilities to serve people in other languages, or the targeted population. The unique thing about the RIA model type is identifying the victim and engaging them, and just understanding that the target population may have a language barrier at the DV courthouse, and how your program meets these challenges is an example of an effective approach that we would be evaluating. Next slide. Now we move to the multidisciplinary team, the purpose, goals, and target population of this model type. This model type supports the Chicago multidisciplinary team partners by assessing the risk of victims who are referred by the police districts that are participating in this initiative. And so far it's the 3rd district, the 4th district, and the 14th district. And the purpose of this model type is to increase victim safety by contacting them and engaging them in victim services if possible. Next slide. The program requirements for people who are applying for MDT services. It's the same thing, that staff have to be 40-hour trained and have to be compliant with mandated reporter requirements. We want people who apply for this to really show us that they know how to collaborate with the referring district. So it's not just about waiting to get your referrals from the department and then reaching out. It's also building a relationship with the district. You will be assessing referrals for risk and then make the contact attempt. We would like you to engage victims to accept either your program services, or you can refer them out to services. And it's important that the applicant collaborates and collaborates and participates with all the other MDT partners, so that we can measure the performance of the overall initiative and the workflow, and hopefully to expand into other police districts. Next slide. So now we get to the performance measures for MDT programs. One of those is that we want to ensure that contact is attempted to every referral that you get from your police district. We want people to provide the crisis and safety planning and counseling to those that you're able to reach. And we want you to engage those victims in your agency's DV services or referrals, preferably through formal linkage agreements that you have with other providers. Next slide. Finally, we get to the selection criteria for MDT. And we'd like you to remember that your award is going to be based on the selected police districts that you choose to work with. And then we reserve, DDV reserves the choice of looking at your program's location, the service array that you offer, the languages you're able to provide services in, and other subpopulations that you're able to serve. Unique to this model type in what we're looking at in selection criteria is the strength of effective approaches to engage and collaborate or plan to collaborate with the selected police districts. Next slide. So now we're moving into supervised visitation and safe exchange services. The purpose, goals, target population. The purpose of this model is to provide a safe environment for visitation or exchange among parents and their children. And whether that's in a neutral facility or on a virtual platform where that's appropriate. And the target population are intimate partner victims who are court referred. And obviously, we want you to provide these services at no cost. Next slide. The program requirements for SVSC providers. I'm repeating myself when I say that we need these staff to be 40-hour trained and compliant with the mandated reporter requirements. Programs assess both parents for safety and their willingness to comply and ability to comply with the visitation order. These programs minimize risk by developing and maintaining safety protocol that includes the facility space, the security you're able to offer, using virtual platforms that provide separation of contact between the parents, but also allows the visiting parent to spend time with the child. Programs will provide services or necessary referrals to parents, so they have to have that ability, and also to conduct community education and outreach on domestic violence. Next slide. The performance measures that we use basically is we look at ongoing attendance of sessions that take place without having to stop the session because of inappropriate behavior or non-attendance. Well, that indicates that both parents are comfortable with the services and the program is working as it was intended. We do collect parent feedback on the service measures, whether the goals of the assessment are being met. Next slide, we're going to talk about the selection criteria for supervised visitation and safe exchange. Unique to this model type is the facility footprint, which you'll be sending in to us as part of your application. We need to look at the footprint and how that helps the security and also what security measures you have in place. We want these programs to have the ability to minimize safety risks. And we will be scoring that under the category of agency capacity. Next slide. I will be turning over to Adriana Camargo.
Thank you, Mira. Thank you very much, Mira and Gail, for that. The counseling and advocacy services. This is, as Maura mentioned earlier, the program model that was formerly counseling and then legal advocacy and counseling that have been consolidated for 2022. The goal of the The program model, obviously, is to increase the safety and the self-determination of the victim and their children by ongoing case management, legal advocacy, and other advocacy services. So the goal to provide services through this model is to provide the crisis and safety planning and provide victims information under the Illinois Domestic Violence Act, provide them ongoing case management and advocacy to other systems, and help the victim apply for an order of protection and accompanying it to court. The target population under this particular model does include any victim that falls under the definition of the Illinois Domestic Violence Act. And as Maura alluded to earlier, we don't want victims who are non-intimate partner violence or experience non-intimate partner violence be turned away from the program if you can provide services. However, if you have a good referral network, we would be looking at that to see if you can refer non-intimate partner victims to other programs. But the majority, we understand under this model, will be providing services to victims of intimate partner violence and children. Thank you. Next slide. Before the DDV team seriously considered consolidating the program back, we evaluated the program requirements and the outputs and the performance measures for each model, which they have in common. What we found, and when we sought provider guidance and feedback, is that agencies that were providing the counseling services only portion were in fact having other parts of the program that were doing the legal advocacy and the advocacy work, and not reporting those victims or those services and activities to DFSS. And then the legal advocacy and counseling services, regardless of whether they were at the DV courthouse or whether they were community-based, were providing counseling and ongoing case management through their own agency or through a really very strong referral network. So from the victim's perspective, the DDV team considered collapsing these models so that when a victim approaches any of these agencies or connects with these agencies, they have a full array of services available to them and can choose or be informed about their legal rights as well as receiving ongoing case management. And as I said earlier, we recognize that there's differences between counseling agencies and legal advocacy based on their location and whether they're either stationed at the DV courthouse or whether they've been found in some of the different community areas around the city. We value all of them. We value the services that are happening at the DV courthouse as well as those community-based agencies that are providing the services. And so what we really would like is the victim to be able to provide access to legal services and counseling wherever they engage with their agency. Next slide. The counseling and advocacy program requirements, of course, all staff and that engage with the victims and their children must be 40-hour trained. They must, of course, have a mandated report compliance, provide crisis victim services when the victim first connects with the agency, whether that be in person, whether that be over the phone or a virtual platform, or whether that be meeting the victim where they are. The agency should provide direct counseling or direct legal advocacy or both, meaning your agency can continue to provide ongoing supportive counseling case management and refer legal advocacy services, or the victim refer the victim to legal advocacy services, or your agency can provide legal advocacy services and refer the victim to ongoing case management, or do both. DDV is looking for an agency to offer one or the other at a minimum. And then finally, the agency should be able to conduct education and outreach for victim encouragement and DV awareness. As we know, even during the pandemic, community education and awareness only increases the chances that victims will come forward and access services through your agencies. Next slide, please. The counseling and advocacy services performance measures have been combined for legal advocacy and counseling and legal advocacy. You'll see that the service outcomes for counseling have remained at 60% of survivors show progress toward service plan goal, and legal advocacy has 50% of survivors seeking an order of protection. If you provide one of those services directly, the DDV team will be asking for you to report on those activities. If you're only conducting one or providing one of those services directly, let's say only counseling, you will only be expected to provide data on that outcome. Only if you provide in your application that you're providing both counseling and legal advocacy or both service outcomes, then you will be reporting on both performance measures. The victim outcomes have also been collapsed. Again, if you're only providing counseling, you are only asked to be reporting on the first three on the right-hand side of the slide. If you're conducting legal advocacy, you'll be asked to report out on the bottom right of the slide. And if you're providing both services directly, DDV will be collecting data on your victim outcomes together. For those providers that have been already funded by DFSS and been working with the Victims Outcome Survey, you'll know that we have a Victim Outcome Survey for counseling and we have a Victim Outcome Survey for legal advocacy. The DDV team for 2022 will be combining those survey forms so that a victim can just be referred to one form. Next slide. Here on the slide are the selection criteria for the counseling and advocacy services. The basis of award will be made on score, but like we mentioned earlier, DDV may consider geography, service array, language ability, and ability to serve specific populations. The strength of the program is based on your evidence-based service delivery, understanding the target population, and your community and outreach and engagement, victim engagement services. Under organizational capacity, we'll be measuring you for your agency management and program oversight, as well as your staff qualifications. And later in the presentation, for staff qualifications, Gail will be going over what attachments we require for your application. Performance and management outcomes would be also, if you don't have any past performance data with DFSS, we ask that you provide in the application your data or your past performance in data and how it drives your improvement, and then reasonable cost and leverage of funds. Next slide. Now at this time, we want to provide all of the agencies that are participating on this call a little bit of guidance on your application and how to submit an application. As Maura said earlier, we are eager and we are receptive of all new applications or new applicants for programs. And we encourage you to submit an application with a budget request that leverages other program funding for this project. A little bit of guidance for renewing applicants. Your question will probably be, if I have both a counseling and a legal advocacy program, how should I submit an application? Well, we would like you to take a step back and look at your program and submit an application that reflects your existing program. If your program, for example, has a common site or has staff that is shared in between the two programs, then we encourage you to consolidate your program to demonstrate in your application how a victim can come to your agency and receive all of those services without interruption or referral. If your projects are unique in that they have different locations, it has different staff and different perhaps program goals associated with that staff and that location, then we encourage you to submit a separate application. DDV will not force consolidation of your applications, nor will we force them at the time of award. So your application is a standalone application and should include all of the information that we've been reviewing about your program and how it serves victims. Applicants should also review the prior funding statistics that are found in the guidance for recipients in the application, the RFP. In there, as Maura said, you'll find previous funding amounts, previous statistics on how applicants were awarded, and you can use that as a guide. However, we want to remind you that budget requests should also reflect the application was, in total, and should reflect your need of funding to operate the program. And we acknowledge also that that DDV would like you to leverage your funding and that we don't fund an entire project in completion, in its entirety. Next slide. Now I'm going to hand it over to Gail Woods, who will go over the required attachments for your applications.
So we want to reiterate or iterate that application, your attachments can tremendously impact your program score. As a reviewer, one who has reviewed applications, I can share with you, there may be a program that has done a great job in terms of describing their program. However, they failed to attach the required documents, and it does impact the score that you're able to get. So we just want to encourage you to make sure that you've attached all of the required documents. All of the model types are required to submit a budget, job descriptions, current resumes, and please be sure to include the current position on that resume, as well as your 40-hour certification. These attachments demonstrate the organizational capacity and strength of your program. Some applications will require formal linkage agreements, whereas for others, a list of those will suffice. You heard Mira talking about the Supervised Visitation and Safe Exchange. That's an example of an application that will require a specific attachment, that safety protocol. So you want to make sure that you pay attention to that. And this year, there's no work plan required. However, the proposal, and we're happy about that, and we know you will be, but the proposed detailed budget is still required on DFSS form. Next slide. And I'll turn it over to Mira.
So as we talk about delivering services in the current environment and how it may be in the future, of course, we have to talk about the pandemic and how it has impacted the way people provide services. So we are still navigating through the pandemic just as you are, and trying to be, as adaptive as possible to the changing landscape. The delegates, all of you, the people who provide the services, you are the city's frontline workers. And you're helping victims through what we've heard is that, domestic violence is going up. It's not going anywhere. There's a lot of additional stress. And all of you who provide services are the frontline workers. One thing all of you know, historically, if you have applied or been funded with us before, we have been very insistent that services have to happen in person. So, of course, with the pandemic, we had to set that aside this year. And in setting that aside, through talking with you current providers about how services are being provided, we realized that remote services in some cases are appropriate, and it's a good thing. So we are going to continue to now be more flexible and to allow programs to meet victims where they are and provide services in the fashion that is most convenient for them. So just quickly, we can go through each of the program models, what impact the pandemic has had on it, and then sort of the result, our takeaway as the Division on Domestic Violence. Counseling services and legal advocacy services. Obviously, the impact was that services had to be provided remotely. The court sometimes was closed, or there was a stay-at-home order. People could not go out. So the result of that is that services now can be remote, they can be virtual, they can be in person, it's opened up a lot, the way that you can provide services. And I think that's a good thing. For the resource and information advocates, once again, the court was sometimes physically closed. There's a hybrid way of doing things. And so the impact was that RIAs they had to change from doing in-person work at the courthouse. And I believe all the RIAs helped to support the legal advocacy hotline that was created. So obviously the result of that is that RIAs now have the flexibility to adapt to whatever space, whatever process or stage the court is in. When we talk about legal services, once again, the court was operating on a hybrid level of in-person versus remote. So the impact of that was that legal service programs had to start offering remote services. And the result was that legal service providers became even more flexible to adapt to where the court was in that process. Supervised visitation and safe exchange programs, wow, they really had to change the way they did things. There was just, not every family was eligible for remote services. However, sometimes people just could not come in. So the result of all that is that virtual visits, if they're appropriate, that's now on the menu of services that SVSE providers can offer. With MDT providers, because most of what they did was on the telephone, there really has not been a lot of changes to that. So we can go to the next slide, and I believe I'm handing it back to Adriana.
No, actually, this is Julia Talbot.
Oh, well, thank you. So I am Julia Talbot. I manage the RFP process for the Department of Family and Support Services here. So I've been on a lot of webinars lately. I usually spend this time to talk about how to navigate e-procurement. With CDGA though, we're going through so many different program models that I really want to have time for all of your good questions. Also, just a plug, there is a technical assistance session about how to navigate e-procurement that's offered by the Office of Budget and Management, who is overseeing the whole CDGA RFP process. That's going to run from 10 to 12 tomorrow, Wednesday, April 21st. And you don't have to sign up or register. You just hop on. There was one yesterday. It was pretty well attended. It's very useful. And it's going to go over everything that you need to know. What I'm going to do right now is very quickly go over how to ask a question in e-procurement. What we're doing this year was a little bit different as part of kind of our work around equity and access that was more referred to real early on in the webinar, that we are kind of going to a more formalized procurement model where when you call with a question, basically we're going to take you're either going to submit a question through email like you or a phone call like you always did, or through e-procurement. Those questions are going to be gathered. However, you're not going to get an answer for calling. We're going to gather all those questions. We're going to put them into FAQ documents and post them on the DFSS website, and then also on the application website in the e-procurement environment, so that everybody gets their information at the same time and kind of, keeps things a little bit more equitable. So today, what I'm going to talk to you about is how to navigate e-procurement to ask a question in it. I will be doing a few little like links to resources. All of this is going to be posted on the DFSS website. A link to this webinar will also be posted on the DFSS website. And when the applications are released on May 3rd, that will also, these things will also be made available. So I can't encourage you guys enough to go to the DFSS website just for kind of your one-stop shop for everything CDGA for DFSS at least. So today, obviously, it's pre-proposal webinar, April 20th. The RFP is going to be released May 3rd at 9 o'clock on the e-procurement website, and that's when you're going to be able to start your application questions. Right now, you can look at the book. You can read and discuss and figure out which ones you want to apply for, but you're not going to be able to actually access the application questions or start an application in e-procurement until May 3rd. Those applications are due on June 17th at 12 o'clock noon, and the contracts are going to start on January 1st, 2022. Let me just, can't say this enough, this system, the e-procurement system, we've been using for about 4 years. System doesn't seem to crash, or it hasn't yet, knock on wood, but it does have a very firm deadline, and unless you get in at 12 o'clock noon on June 17th, there are no extensions. We don't accept late applications, and in fact, the only way we can accept a late application would be to reopen the entire RFP, ask everybody who did submit to resubmit, et cetera, et cetera. So we're very disinclined to do that. I will say, I'm going to go through where you can get technical assistance and help. I will say though that this department alone has 23 RFPs out. we're one of 5 departments, or maybe even 6 in the city that are part of the CDGA website. So when I say save early, save often and submit early, I really mean start early. So start early, save often, submit early, because even with technical assistance stuff, whereas generally you would call me, you call the OBM helpline, you would email us for your e-procurement stuff. Sometime, towards the end there, it will be, you might be waiting. And so best to get this stuff done early, start early, really, please start early, and submit early. You can always pull your RFP, you can always pull your application back and update it or change it or tweak it if you need to up until that 12 noon. But every year I have people who didn't make it in, they weren't able to submit, and it's really sad on both ends. We really want to read your applications. We really are looking for people, we are excited about your ideas. We're always so tickled when people want to help, do this very important work, but you can't do the work unless you get your application in on time. So let's get started. Let's go to the next slide, and I can kind of continue my abbreviated dog and pony show. So as I said, late applications will not be accepted. All questions around program design and et cetera must be received through e-procurement. You also, we'll answer questions in the webinar. You can call, but we're really trying to direct those questions into the e-procurement system. And then we're going to post answers and FAQs on the DFSS website and in the applications via an amendment. If you have questions about accessing and managing e-procurement, you should call OBM or email OBM, or you can call me or email me. Those questions will be answered immediately. You don't have to wait on how to log in. OBM has customer support at cityofchicago.org. They have a helpline, 744-HELP, real easy to remember. Just remember the hotline, that hotline operates during business hours, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. If you are doing an application at Saturday night, that's when you probably would get it. You'll have a better chance at getting responded to, and I am making no promises, but you'll have a better chance at getting responded to if you text or if you call or email me. Don't text me, please. The phone number doesn't work for text. I can't stress enough, visit the DFSS CDGA website for updates. I'm loving this website. It's visually appealing. It has all the information you could ever want on CDGA and DFSS on it. If you are a person that does well with reading your training or being trained up in instructions through reading or videos, screenshots, the training material link down here is really for you. We have videos on how to just do basic stuff. And again, there's that OBM TA session tomorrow. You can get to the link either on OBM's website or on ours. And you don't have to register, just show up, and it's from 10 to 12 tomorrow morning. Let's go to the next slide. Thank you. So here we're going to get into how to ask a question in e-procurement. So most importantly, if to ask a question in e-procurement, you need an account, an iSupplier account specifically. In the city parlance, there's iSupplier and there's e-procurement. The iSupplier platform is where the individual applicants or organization has an account, and that iSupplier account allows you to access and submit and interface with e-procurement, which is where the contractual work of the city resides. So if you don't have an iSupplier account, you need one to get into e-procurement. And if you don't have an iSupplier account, you should call the e-procurement hotline and they will help you get set up. It's pretty simple. You fill out a couple of screens, you submit, and then you wait 3 to 5 days or 24 hours, depending on the flow, on the workflow, to get a link to set up your account. So that takes a couple of, it can take up to a couple of days. So this is why you want to start early. Like maybe you're picking up on the theme of starting early. So to begin the question of, the process rather of asking a question in e-procurement, you'll need to log into your iSupplier account via e-procurement and find the RFP. So all of our RFPs forevermore are going to be found on this e-procurement website. Here's the link. You can get there a lot of different ways. This link is posted all over the place. If you want me to send it to you specifically, I'm happy to. Just email me. So let's go here and we're going to get started. So in this beautiful environment and this beautiful fantasy of e-procurementness that we're having, you have an iSupplier account and you're ready to log in. So we're going to go to the next screen. When you go into this, when you click on the link that I just showed was at the bottom of the last screen, you're going to get to this screen. And you'll see at the bottom, there's a very, coy little login on the bottom right-hand side. You're going to click on that, and that is going to help you get to the login page. So next slide, this is the login page. You'll see here, there's your username, there's your password, there's your login assistance. If you forget one of those things, that is very quick and easy. I've never forgotten my username for this one, but I certainly forget passwords plenty, and this works very simply. It doesn't take any time at all. So you're gonna take your username, you're gonna log in to your password, you're gonna hit the login button, and you'll get to the next slide, which will be this. So logging in will bring you to this screen, and then you're gonna open this City of Chicago online bidding menu and open up sourcing, and then to the sourcing homepage, and then you'll click on sourcing homepage, which will bring you to the next screen. The next screen is where you're going to search for your RFP or RFQ number, RFQ. Now you can do that by title, number. You can see all the different things. Number is really I find the kind of most straightforward. Like title, it's very picky. But if you get the number of your RFP, you set the search open solicitations to number, you type in your RFQ number, and then you hit go. So you can find the RFQ number. Let's see, go to the next slide, please. And here just happen to be the DV RFQ numbers. Imagine, or the RFP numbers. So, all you have to do is, I think I want to post the chart with all the numbers on it onto the DFSS website, but these numbers are also listed in the CDGA book. So if you're looking at your program, Legal Services for Victims of Domestic Violence, it will have that RFQ number in the title. We did that just for you. So you pick one and then you put it into the box, and then you hit go, and that's going to pull up. Let's go to the next slide. It will pull up this, and then to open, to start the asking of the question, there's this actions bar you'll see on the right-hand side. So you'll see actions, and I have it hooked on online discussions because that's what you need to do the RFP, or to ask a question rather. The create quote, though, is how you would actually start an application. So if you're like, don't have any questions, just want to get started early because, early is best, then you would hit create quote. But here we're asking a question. You're going to click on online discussions, and then you'll be brought to this slide, which is fairly straightforward. So you want to take a new message. You click on that, and we'll go to the next slide. And here you are at something that looks just like, lots and lots of emails that you've sent. You would type in your subject, I have a question, or my question is about whatever. You type in your message. If for some reason you have an attachment you want to share with us, you can attach it, and then you just click send, and you are done. Very straightforward, very simple, and we look forward to seeing lots of questions this way. It will be great. Can't say it enough. The applications are due on June 17th, 2021 at 12 o'clock noon. I really, for people who are new to the system, it is not just press send and whoosh, it's gone. It is more like press send and then, 15 to 60 minutes later, you have figured out and whoosh, it's gone. So make sure you give yourself plenty of time to make those applications. We can't award you a contract if we don't read your application, and we can't read your application unless it gets to us before 12 o'clock noon on June 17th. So that is kind of what that's really all I have to say for now about e-procurement. My email and phone number are easy enough to find in the scheme of things at CDGA or on the DFSS website. It's at the end of this of this webinar deck. If you have questions about e-procurement, please call early. So now we're going to just open it up to questions. So I see there are a few people who have already written questions into the question box, and that's super awesome. And then this is time for all the rest of you attendees. If you have a question, it's a great time to get it asked or answered rather. these questions will all be put into a FAQ, which is going to be posted onto the DFSS website, also posted with the application. So you'll be able to get your answer now and also read it later. Kind of, you know, could it get better? I don't think so. So the first question we have here is to please repeat the portion of the IDVA and the definition of who we can serve. And is everyone under IDVA, or is it only intimate partners? So I will defer to the awesome DV team on that. And yeah, take it away.
This is Adriana Camarda. Julia, I just want to say I had to get back into my chair after that presentation. The definition of a victim under the IDVA includes both non-intimate partner victims, includes intimate partner victims as well as some limited non-intimate partner victims. For example, siblings, parent, adult child, and adult parent. It could also be caretaker, and it could also, one other definition, it could be also somebody with a disability. Only under the counseling and advocacy services is DV actually tracking whether the program is serving other victims other than IPV. We are not mandating that you serve a non-IPV or any other victim under the IDVA. We ask that if your program does serve non-IPV victims, you can report that to DFSS and to DV, and we would accept that as a qualified victim under that target population under counseling and advocacy. For all of the other RFPs, the target population is not, intimate partner violence.
Great, thank you. So the next question I have here is, how does the mandated reporter requirement for legal services take into account the professional responsibilities / ethics rules that attorneys are required to follow? They are in conflict with each other.
We will have to get back to you on that question. We didn't know that there was an attorney conflict with the mandated reporter, and so we'll look into that and get you a response when the Q&A is published.
Perfect, thank you. And then here's our third question. Did domestic violence funding within the department remain the same, decrease, or increase when comparing this funding round with the past year?
We don't know what the funding amount will be for 2022 at this time. We assume that we are going to be receiving base level funding. However, it could increase, it could decrease, as you know, during the 2020 budget hearing and process.
Great. So those were 3 questions. Those were the only 3 questions that we have right now. If there are other questions, please type them into the questions chat area so that we can ask, read them and get them answered. I see Tom has put up here, this is if you have program questions, you can reach out to Adriana. For non-programmatic questions, you can reach out to me or OBM. But let's have it up. We'll have it up here for a little bit longer to see if anybody has any questions. Other than that, we would be. We'll let you get back to your days. Oh, here's another one. Great. I love questions. The Chicago MDT project is funded by another funder, and the partners have specific relationships with each other and the police departments. How does the DFSS RFP impact or recognize that?
We are not a funded partner for the MDT program. However, we fund the portion of the follow-up and assessment of victims that are in those police districts. So we participate and collaborate with the MDT partners, but our funding provides the assessment and services after the CPD referral is made.
Great. Thank you. Again, questions? This is where I start having like the flashback to Ferris Bueller. We're asking like questions. So, well, if there are no further questions, then I guess we will bid you adieu. Thank you so much for coming. If you have questions further questions, if stuff pops into your head later, do reach out. Obviously, you cannot submit a question in e-procurement until the application period starts on May 3rd. So that's when you start, emailing stuff, and we will address all questions that are received in the FAQs. We're hoping that the ones for today are going to they'll actually be part of the May 3rd application release. They might make it to the DFSS website a minute or so sooner. But I see it's still snowing out. I hope that all of you have wonderful days, and thank you so much for your time. We look so forward to reading your applications, and I'd like to just thank my awesome coworkers for putting together really great presentations. I always feel like I learn a lot when I, get to come to webinars and be an MC. With that, if there's no further questions, if there's anybody, if we've all shared everything we're going to share, I'd say go forward. Have a great day.